It was great meeting you at the Ancestral Health. What did you think about that?
Oh, I had a great time. I mean, it was like my tribe. Finally, you know, I got to meet all these people that I'd been curious about for so many years, and everybody talking the talk, and the energy was really high. And I can't wait for next year. You know, we're starting something big here.
Did you notice how gradually over the 2 days that more and more people were going barefoot?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think if we'd been there for a week or so, people would have started getting naked. You know,
yeah. Next year.
Yeah.
So, for those listening and watching, I'm just having a Skype chat with Frank Forencich. You're up there in Seattle, Tacoma, right? And you have a operation up there that you call Exuberant Animal.
Right.
So tell us about that. What's that all about?
Well, Exuberant Animal is a company. It's my company, and it started about 5 years ago with a couple of the books that I've written, and now we do trainings. We do exuberant animal training jams that are directed toward personal trainers and movement specialists and people who want to learn our approach to movement. And it's a lot of fun. It's primal, practical, and playful. That's kind of the approach that we take. So we've got the human evolution element, we've got the functional fitness element, and we've got the play element. So they all kind of interlock together with one another, and we do a little bit of corporate team building as well.
So this is not. This is. I mean, you're well known in the paleo primal community, but this isn't primarily a diet and exercise thing. It's more a movement thing. But do you address the diet and exercise aspect?
Right. What we do, our typical event, a typical training session, oscillates between presentations and movement training. So we'll do a half-hour presentation on health education. We talk about stress, we talk about diet, we talk about movement principles, and then we actually do 45 minutes of play-based movement, and then we do another presentation. So throughout the weekend, we have this cycling effect where we oscillate from one to the other, and it's great fun. It keeps the energy level really high.
So take me back to that, beyond that 5-year point. What got you thinking about this in these terms? Did something happen, or did you just naturally fall into it, or did you were you up at 2 o'clock in the morning Googling around and like, that's what I want to do?
Well, I actually had a personal experience that set me up for this thing, because as a child, I was a pretty sick little kid. I had a lot of vague digestive problems and that sort of thing. And I eventually got involved in movement and sports, and particularly swimming, and that just completely changed my body and made me healthy. And that transformation had this profound impact on me, and I became really interested in exercise from that time forward. So I got involved in water polo. And this was down in the Bay Area. I played water polo in high school and college. Then I got involved in martial arts and in rock climbing. And throughout that whole thing, I was studying biology, and in particular human evolution, and I knew there had to be a connect between the studies of human evolution and the amount of fun I was having in the physical arts. So that's what led me to go to Africa and study human origins. And ever since then, I've been trying to put it all together.
Right. And so it started off a body thing. And then the mind thing came in with the evolution. And did it seem like a natural connect for you, mind body?
Oh yeah, it was huge. And the other element that's come into play for me is meeting this character up here in the Pacific Northwest that we call the Barefoot Sensei. And Mick Dodge, he's been barefooting for the last 20 years or so, and he really
Before it got cool.
Yeah. He really showed me a lot about attention through barefooting, because the first question he asked me almost right out of the gate when I first met him, he says, what's the first thing that happens when you take your shoes off? Well, you start paying attention to the world. And that clicked for me because I realized, wow, we've got this 6 million year history of barefooting. And certainly our attention, our awareness must have been different during that time. And we spent a lot of time paying attention to the world around us. And that's something we've lost in the modern world. So barefooting it's a lot more than just an athletic event or a way to improve athletic performance. It's a way to really forge a new relationship with the world through our attention.
It was back a few years ago. I think I blogged the first time about barefooting. I'd been an avid walker for years, for a lot of years, and I kept having these chronic issues. Every morning I did 3-4 miles with the dog. And I kept having these chronic issues with my feet and everything. And I actually, even though I was still wearing shoes, I had to learn how to walk again, the proper way to walk without the heel striking and stuff like that. You could still do it with shoes. And then when this whole paleo thing happened and people started talking about going barefoot, I looked into this. I'm like, wow, this makes so much sense because I'd been through it just on my own over time. And I think one of the very first articles I wrote, so when you say you start paying attention, what it reminded me of is I read this article, I think by some podiatrist or something like that, and he said, just to give you an idea of the amount of nerve sensors and endings that you have in your feet, you have more of them in your feet than in your genitals. So
right. And the language here is to describe the foot as a sensory organ. Right. Which it is. And that changes everything when you start to think in those terms.
We, I started off like with the Vibrams and things like that. And I still use those for some of the more arduous hikes over, uneven terrain with a lot of rocks and everything. Unless you're doing it all the time, it can get pretty difficult. But around here, around the neighborhood, when I walk the dogs, around the streets and the sidewalks and stuff, I almost always go barefoot now. It's just the way to go. And you're right. It's like it really turns a walk into a really exuberant experience. Yes. A plain old walk. It's like, wow, you feel alive.
Right. The other barefooting moment I had, awakening, you might say, the barefoot sensei had me walk with my fingers in my ears, barefoot. And then all of a sudden, you can feel the vibration or the lack of vibration that comes through your walk. So if you're a heel striker and you've got your fingers in your ears, you feel that vibration coming up through the heels. And then you get onto the forefoot, you get onto the ball, and it goes away. And now all of a sudden it's quiet. That's dramatic proof that things are different.
Now, what do you say to the people who say, well, what about sharp rocks and stuff like that? Do you have to look everywhere you're walking? What would your answer be to that?
I'm kind of an intermediate barefooter. I'm not an advanced barefooter, but I've done a fair amount of hiking in the mountains barefoot, and I've stepped on a lot of sharp rocks. And what has happened, what I've noticed, is that there's a reflex response to that. The foot is smart enough and the leg is smart enough to send a command to the spinal cord that really shuts off your quads. Yeah. And so you hit that sharp rock, and the foot is not going to hurt itself. Yeah. So you will change your gait, and you will unweight that foot. You will put more weight on the other side of the body. And I've never cut my foot. Yeah. Now urban glass is probably a different story, but that's
right.
Just a different
environment. I've that's the only thing is I got a teeny sharp shard of glass in my foot one time. I should not have opened that champagne bottle out on the patio with a knife. Right. But that's exactly what I found as well. At first, walking around just on pavement or cement sidewalks and watching where you're going, I think was a good way to start. And over time, you reawaken that sense
Yes.
that's buried 4 million years inside you, and then gradually you'll find that you don't even watch anymore, and when you hit that sharp piece of stone or whatever, you immediately unload. That's been exactly my experience.
Yeah, it's fun. I meet so many people, they say, wow, you're going barefoot. I could never do that because my feet are too sensitive.
Right. Why do you think they're sensitive?
My response is to say, well, no, your feet are not sensitive enough.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
So you develop that sensitivity.
And people, what's really hilarious to me is the bigger and bigger boots for like ankle support. I'm like, your ankles are just fine. What they need is number one, they need a little bit of exercise, and number two is you need to be connected to the surface you're walking on, so that so that your ankle doesn't get lazy and turn on you. You know, people twist ankles because they're wearing too much shoe, not enough shoe.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I can see it for skiing. You know, because you have these 6 foot levers connected to you. But
yeah, it's fascinating, and I think the barefoot revolution now has really opened up a can of worms, because now people are starting to think not just about improving their athletic performance, but their actual relationship to habitat. Their relationship to the world. And I think you're going to hear more and more of this talk now about getting outdoors, getting out of the gym, getting off the treadmills, and getting into nature. And so this is the tip of a very profound social change relating to the body.
So do you think it's interesting that we got off on this barefoot thing? Because for me, you could talk philosophy, Rene Descartes, whatever, the whole mind-body dichotomy thing. But I think the barefooting is such an analog for how in modern society we have tried to separate the mind from the body. What do you think about that?
Oh, it's really fascinating. And you bring up Descartes. I think that's a real pivotal moment for our culture, because Descartes really changed us from being a native holistic orientation to being this modern scientific dualism where the mind and body are two separate things, this radical skepticism about the body. And it helped us develop modern science, great thing, but really destructive to our relationship to the body. A little background on Descartes himself. When he was a young man, as a philosopher, he wanted to start from scratch. He wanted to be, get down to the root of knowledge. And he was a radical skeptic. And he even went so far as to doubt his own sensations from his own body. So he said, what if there was like a radical demon who was pumping false sensation into my brain? How would I ever know? So he resolved, he says, well, I'm not even going to trust the sensations coming from my body, and therefore I'm going to identify only with my thought processes. And we bought into that. We bought into that idea, and that led to modern science and modern academics, and that's why we no longer, as a culture, we don't value the body very much.
And even if not explicitly, implicitly, unbridled reductionism, those sorts of things.
Right. And that's why when you go to the university, you see the professor standing at the podium with his arms and his body locked in the podium, and no participation by the body at all. And so much of our study in university environments and in business, in management, in a lot of areas, is all neck up. We're still a Cartesian culture, and hopefully barefooters and ancestral health people can now step in and say, no, look, we have to get participation from the neck down as well. It's all one organism.
Right. And you could talk about everything. I mean, how is it that talking about sex, it's not. There's certainly a mind element there, but I think you kind of have to have the body, or else there's not a lot of point.
Have the body, yes.